Jesus was born in Bethlehem and raised here in Nazareth. During his formative years, there was an uprising of the people in Galilee against Roman rule. There was an extended period of relative peace during the time of Jesus' life in the client kingdom of Herod Antipas, under the rule of the Roman Emperor Caesar Augustus and their successors. The growth of Herod Antipas' influence throughout the region, which is identified as the Galilee, and the changing economic times impacted on the way people lived. The peaceful times brought with it economic expansion, and it was a time of change, which was challenging for some. By the time Jesus began his public life, there was a simmering discontent among the people. Jesus called people to be disciples, but he was not the only voice calling for followers. There were other people claiming to be Messiah. There were various groups in Jesus' day calling for people's allegiance. The Sadducees called for people to live according to the written laws of Moses. The Pharisees called for people to live according to their own particular interpretations. The Zealots stood against Roman rule and all that Rome represented, and the Essenes sought purity by withdrawing from mainstream society. Collectively, all this meant that there were political and religious tensions at the time when Jesus' mission took place. Political stability matters in any era when you try to examine what is happening in the community. At the time of Jesus himself, to a certain extent, there was economic prosperity. The client kingdom of Herod Antipas had certain things that meant that it didn't have major threats about it. And so there was a degree of stability. Economic development was beginning to take shape, and new cities were emerging through the investment in those cities and the building up of community. All along the Via Maris trade route, there was development and new cities emerging. That would impact places like Nazareth and nearby Cana. The two would be very distinctive communities at one time, but today, when you drive from one to the other, it could almost be the same city. Such has been the growth here. But the impact and influence to relatively small places of what was happening in nearby Tiberias and elsewhere would certainly have its impact upon the people living here, probably causing within the minds of some people and underneath the surface a degree of uncertainty. These were stable times, but changing times are coming. The development of cities like Tiberias put pressure on traditional village life and the social structures that were familiar to people in the first century. The farmers and village workers were accustomed to producing food and supplies that people needed for life, but the concentration of people in the new cities put demands on the farmers that many struggled to meet. Put simply, there was more demand than supply in first century Galilee, and the ruling elite increased pressure on the farmers and field workers to produce more to supply the cities. During the time of Jesus, the Sea of Galilee was a major centre of industry. Some 200 villages populated the shoreline of the sea, and as we've already discovered, had over 250 working fishing boats. It was a thriving economy, and the fishing industry was such a significant form of employment. In the first century, there was little separation between religion and the rest of community activities. The Jewish religion was part of everyday life and was reflected in the laws, customs, and traditions of the day. In any study of religion, we often talk about the context in which it expresses itself. Religious life at the time of Jesus also had its impact, and we have to place Jesus into that context. Very much in a Jewish context, it's not that everybody belonged to the same group. There were different groups from different regions, but there were three particular religious groups that you have to really take seriously. There are the Pharisees, and there are the Sadducees, who had different views about resurrection, for example. And there were the Zealots, those people that were emerging, that were feeling very strongly about nationalistic ideas. Jesus' teaching affirmed that it was right to do good on the Sabbath, and this would challenge some more rigorous teaching. Jesus taught that the law should be understood as an expression of God's love for people. He taught this to show honour where it was due. But who did he select? And where from? What is its significance? And who has been called over the years?